On June 23, 1858, the Inquisitor of Bologna, the Dominican monk Pier Gaetano Feletti, signed Order Number 428/1858 of the Sacred Congregation of the Roman and Universal Inquisition. The document ordered the officers of the Papal Gendarmerie, under the command of Marshal Pietro Lucidi, to immediately arrive at the house of the Jewish merchant Edgardo Mortara at the address Bologna, Via Lame, House 225. The purpose of the operation was to seize the 6-year-old child Edgardo Mortara from his family and escort him to Rome. The basis for this administrative police act was not judicial hearings with the participation of the parties, but a secret report from the inquisitorial tribunal, based on the testimony of the family's former servant. Before we move on to a detailed analysis of the legal, institutional, and administrative mechanisms of this high-profile case, please subscribe to the channel. This helps us conduct in-depth archival investigations and produce high-quality documentary content. To understand the legal nature of what happened, it is necessary to analyze the state legal structure of the Papal States as of 1858. After the suppression of the revolutionary events of 1848 to 1849 and the liquidation of the Roman Republic, Pope Pius IX restored the theocratic absolute monarchy. The stability of the regime was ensured by the presence of a French military contingent in Rome and Austrian troops in the papal legations, including Bologna. In this system, canonical legislation held absolute priority over the civil legal order. The Jewish population of the Papal States had the status of a protected but rights-limited minority. The legal status of Jews was regulated by historical documents dating back to the papal bull Cum Nimis Absurdum of 1555 and the updated Code of Laws of the Holy See from 1775 and 1827. According to the norms of papal law, Jews were strictly forbidden to hire servants of the Christian faith. Violation of this prohibition was punishable by fines, but in practice in Bologna in the 1850s, this rule was regularly ignored by both small traders and the local police. The institutional conflict in the Mortara case arose at the intersection of canon law and the practice of domestic service. In 1851 to 1852, an 18-year-old Catholic woman, Anna Morisi, worked in the house of Edgardo Mortara. In the autumn of 1851, the 1-year-old Edgardo Mortara fell seriously ill. Anna Morisi, fearing that if deprived of life, the unbaptized infant would go to limbo, secretly performed the baptismal rite away from the parents, sprinkling the child with water and pronouncing the Trinitarian formula. The child survived. For almost 6 years, Anna Morisi kept what happened a secret. In 1857, when another child in the Mortara family fell seriously ill, the servant refused to perform a similar action, and the infant died. In a state of emotional shock, Morisi told an acquaintance about the 1851 event, and through a chain of intermediaries, the information reached the Dominicans of the Bologna monastery of San Domenico, and then personally to Inquisitor Pier Gaetano Feletti. From the point of view of Catholic dogma and canon law, formed by the works of Thomas Aquinas and enshrined in the decisions of the Council of Trent, baptism performed by any person, even a heretic or non-Christian, was considered valid if 3 conditions were met: the use of pure water, the pronunciation of the correct Trinitarian formula, and the intention to do what the Church does. In canon law, this principle was formulated as the indelibility of the baptismal seal, character indelibilis. From the moment of the rite, the baptized person became a full member of the Catholic Church and fell under its exclusive jurisdiction. The bull of Pope Benedict XIV, Nemo allergy, of 1747 strictly forbade the baptism of children of Jews without parental consent, except for one case: if the child was in a state of immediate threat of death, in articulo mortis. However, the same bull emphasized that if baptism had already taken place in fact, even in violation of the rules, it was recognized as unconditionally valid. At the same time, canon law prohibited the upbringing of a Christian child in a non-Christian family due to the risk of apostasy. From the Vatican's legal point of view, 6-year-old Edgardo Mortara was a Catholic citizen being held in a non-believing environment. The mechanics of the Holy Office's investigation were characterized by strict secrecy and the absence of an adversarial process. In early 1858, Inquisitor Folletti summoned Anna Morici to a secret interrogation at the Tribunal of Bologna. The interrogation was conducted without the presence of lawyers, members of the Mortara family, or representatives of the Jewish community. The interrogation transcripts were sent directly to Rome, to the Sacred Congregation of the Roman and Universal Inquisition, headed personally by Pope Pius IX, with operational matters managed by Cardinal Costantino Patrizzi. For several months, Vatican canonists studied Morici's testimony for compliance with the conditions for the validity of the baptism. After the materials were approved by Pope Pius IX, a secret order was issued for the forcible removal of the child. On the evening of June 23, 1858, Marshal of the Papal Gendarmerie Pietro Lucidi arrived at the Mortara apartment on Via Lame with 2 officers. The head of the family, Momolo Mortara, demanded to see a warrant or court order. The marshal replied that he was acting on the direct orders of the Holy Office of Bologna. After a stormy protest from the family and neighbors, Marshal Lucidi agreed to provide a postponement until the morning of June 24, 1858, on the condition that gendarmes remain on duty in the apartment. On the morning of June 24, 1858, Edgardo Mortara was taken from his family and placed in a closed carriage of the papal post. The transportation logistics were planned to eliminate the possibility of interception or public manifestations. The move from Bologna to Rome lasted several days through the territories of the papal legations under constant convoy. On June 29, 1858, the child was delivered to Rome and placed in the house of the catechumens, Casa dei Catecumeni, on Via Madonna dei Monti, a specialized institutional facility founded in 1543 by Pope Paul III for the custody and Catholic education of converts. The administrative expenses for the transportation and subsequent maintenance of the child were fully covered by the papal treasury through the structures of the Sacred Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith, Congregatio de Propaganda Fide. Vatican financial records for 1858 to 1860 note the allocation of a personal stipend for Edgardo Mortara's education in the amount of 12 scudi per month from the personal fund of Pope Pius IX. After an initial stay in the house of the catechumens, the child was transferred to a closed boarding school at the Pontifical Seminary of St. Peter, and then to a college of regular canons. The Mortara family immediately began a legal and political campaign for the child's return. The father, Momolo Mortara, traveled to Rome, where he attempted to file an appeal with the Holy Office and obtain an audience with Cardinal Secretary of State Giacomo Antonelli. In August and September of 1858, Momolo Mortara received permission for several brief meetings with his son at the house of the catechumens. However, these meetings were held under the strict supervision of the institution's rector, Abbot Enrico Sara, and in the presence of Catholic witnesses. The meeting protocols, drawn up by the administration of the House of the Catechumens, asserted that the child had voluntarily expressed a desire to remain in the Catholic faith and asked not to be returned to his family. Conversely, in Edgardo Mortara's letters to the leadership of Rome's Jewish community, it was noted that the 6-year-old boy was in a state of psychological shock and expressed a desire to return home. The failure to resolve the matter within the framework of the papal legal system forced the Mortara family and the leadership of Rome's Jewish community to turn to international diplomacy. Beginning in the autumn of 1858, the Edgardo Mortara case escalated into a major international crisis, dealing a catastrophic blow to the diplomatic standing of the Holy See. Major international institutions and political figures joined the struggle. Jewish communities in Great Britain, France, the United States, Austria, and Prussia formed coordinating committees. Count Camillo Benso di Cavour, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Sardinia, Piedmont, instantly recognized the case's legal and propaganda potential. Cavour used the incident to discredit the Pope's temporal power before the European powers, proving the incompatibility of papal rule with modern principles of civil law and freedom of conscience. The Paris-based Alliance Israélite Universelle, founded in 1860, precisely under the influence of the Mortara case, launched a campaign in the European press. Articles with detailed analysis of the violation of parental rights appeared in the Times, Journal des Débats, and Neue Freie Presse. Emperor Napoleon III of France, whose troops provided military protection for the Papal States against Italian nationalists, personally appealed to Pius IX through his ambassador in Rome, the Duc de Gramont. Napoleon III persistently recommended returning the child to his parents or, as a compromise, placing him in the care of Jewish relatives in Turin, warning that French public opinion would not tolerate the defense of medieval institutions. Similar official protests were lodged by the British government under Lord Palmerston and Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria. In 1859, Sir Moses Montefiore, President of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, personally arrived in Rome, hoping to secure an audience with the Pope. However, Pius IX categorically refused to receive Montefiore and rejected all diplomatic démarches from the European states. The Holy See's response to international pressure was formulated in rigid canonical and political terms. In reply to inquiries from foreign ambassadors, Cardinal Giacomo Antonelli stated that the matter was outside the sphere of politics and diplomacy, as it concerned the salvation of a human soul and the fulfillment of divine law. In audiences with diplomats and religious leaders, Pope Pius IX repeatedly uttered the formula non possumus, we cannot, emphasizing that canonical law left the pontiff no right to return a baptized Christian child to non-Christian parents. In March 1859, during a public speech, Pius IX declared that he did not fear the threats of European sovereigns and was prepared to defend the spiritual jurisdiction of the Church at the cost of any political losses. A source-critical analysis of archival documents reveals deep contradictions in the materials upon which the accusation and the decision of the Holy Office were based. The main legal document of the case was the interrogation transcripts of the servant Anna Maurici. A detailed study of these transcripts, conducted by independent lawyers after 1860, uncovered numerous inconsistencies and evidence of pressure on the witness. In 1860, as a result of the Second Italian War of Independence and the rapid disintegration of the Papal States, Bologna was liberated from papal administration and joined the Kingdom of Sardinia. On January 2, 1860, Bologna's new judicial investigative body issued an arrest warrant for Inquisitor Pier Gaetano Folletti on charges of kidnapping and abuse of authority. During the investigation and the public trial of Folletti, held in Bologna from April 16 to 24, 1860, the materials of the 1858 case underwent rigorous cross-examination and legal audit. The testimony of Anna Morici, given under oath in 1860, differed significantly from her statements to the Inquisition Tribunal in 1858. It was revealed that in 1851, when the one-year-old Edgardo fell ill, Morici was an illiterate 18-year-old girl with no complete understanding of the Catholic Catechism. During the 1860 interrogation, she was unable to accurately reproduce the Trinitarian formula which she claimed to have recited over the infant in 1851. Furthermore, Morici became confused about the dating of events, first naming the winter of 1851 and then the spring of 1852. The court heard the testimony of the doctor who treated Edgardo, Dr. Pasquale Pasqualini. Under oath, Dr. Pasqualini stated that in the autumn of 1851, the child had indeed suffered a mild form of intestinal infection, but his condition was never assessed as critical or life-threatening. Thus, the canonical condition of in articulo mortis, being in imminent danger of death, necessary for the lawfulness of a secret baptism without parental consent, was effectively absent. The 1860 investigation also uncovered facts regarding the financial and personal interests of the witnesses. Anna Morici had been dismissed from the Mortara household in 1855 for petty theft and immoral behavior. Witnesses from among the residents of Bologna testified against her, pointing to her blackmail of the Mortara family. However, in 1858, Inquisitor Folletti completely ignored this information, failing to conduct a check on the witness's moral character or to allow an independent medical expert evaluation. The defense of Inquisitor Folletti during the 1860 trial was built on an institutional argument. Folletti proved that he had acted strictly within the framework of the legislation of the Papal States in force in 1858, and was executing direct written directives from the Sacred Congregation of the Roman and Universal Inquisition from Rome. Folletti's lawyer, Carlo Magani, emphasized that an official of a theocratic state cannot be subject to criminal liability for executing the laws of his state, even if these laws contradict the new Sardinian legislation. On April 24, 1860, the Bologna Tribunal ruled to acquit Pier Gaetano Folletti on the grounds that he had acted as an official of the lawfully existing executive and judicial power of the Papal State at that time, carrying out the orders of a superior body. This decision demonstrated the legal collision between the institutions of the old theocratic law and the emerging legal system of a unifying Italy. Despite Folletti's acquittal, the 1860 trial publicized the internal mechanisms of the Papal Inquisition and ultimately destroyed the legitimacy of the Holy See in the eyes of liberal Europe. Archival documents seized from the Bologna Inquisition Chancery in 1860 and transferred to the State Archive of Bologna confirmed that the Vatican viewed the Mortara case not as an excess of zealous service by an individual inquisitor, but as a fundamental principle of defending the Church's spiritual sovereignty from the encroachments of the secular state. The fate of Edgardo Mortara himself became a result of a complete institutional reprogramming of the person. Taken from his family at the age of 6, the child was raised in an isolated environment under the direct patronage of Pope Pius IX. The Pope regularly visited the boy, walked with him in the Vatican gardens, and acted as his official guardian. In 1865, at the age of 14, Edgardo entered the novitiate of the Canons Regular of St. Augustine. In 1867, he took his monastic vows and changed his name to Pio Maria, in honor of his patron, Pope Pius IX. On September 20, 1870, Italian troops under the command of General Raffaele Cadorna breached the walls of Rome near the Porta Pia. The temporal power of the Pope ceased to exist, and the Papal States were liquidated and annexed to the Kingdom of Italy. With the fall of the theocratic regime, the historical status of the Holy Office as an organ of state administration and justice also came to an end. At the moment of the capture of Rome in September 1870, Edgardo Mortara was 19 years old. His older brother, Riccardo Mortara, who served as an officer in the Royal Italian Army, arrived in Rome with the advancing troops. Riccardo, together with representatives of the Italian police, appeared at the monastery of the Canons Regular to return his brother to the family. However, the 19-year-old Edgardo Mortara categorically refused to return to his parents and renounce Catholicism. On the contrary, within a few days, he fled Rome under an assumed name across the border to the Austrian Empire, where he took refuge in a monastery of canons in Neustift. In 1873, Edgardo Mortara was ordained as a priest in France. Over the following decades, he served as a Catholic preacher, spoke 9 languages, and was active in missionary work across Europe and North America, frequently giving public lectures in which he justified the actions of Pope Pius IX and asserted that his removal from his family was an act of saving his soul. In 1908, he published his memoirs in French, describing the events of 1858 from the perspective of a faithful Catholic priest. Edgardo Mortara died on March 11, 1940, at the Abbaye de Bouet in Belgium, at the age of 88. The documentary heritage of the Mortara case is preserved in 3 main archival collections: the Vatican Apostolic Archive, the funds of the Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and the Secretariat of the Secretary of State, the State Archive of Bologna, the funds of the 1860 Criminal Tribunal and the materials of the Inquisition, and the National Archive of France, diplomatic correspondence of the embassy in Rome. An analysis of these documents shows that the Mortara case became a turning point in the history of Western law and international relations in the 19th century. The institutional consequences of the Mortara case had a direct impact on the transformation of European legal consciousness. Firstly, it accelerated the process of the Vatican's diplomatic isolation, which made it easier for the government of Victor Emmanuel II and Count Cavour to liquidate the Papal States in 1870 without the risk of military retaliation from France or Austria. Secondly, it served as a catalyst for the legal enshrinement of the inalienable rights of parents in the legislation of most European countries and stimulated the creation of international human rights organizations, such as the Alliance Israélite Universelle. Thirdly, within the Catholic Church itself, this precedent created a difficult legacy that was discussed at the First Vatican Council, 1869 to 1870, and ultimately led to a radical revision of canon law in the 20th century, as recorded in the documents of the Second Vatican Council and the 1983 Code of Canon Law, where the concept of forced baptism and the alienation of children was finally disavowed.